Okay, welcome everybody. I am here with our special guest, Denom. We make videos once or twice a month about the markets and what's going on. He is a very well respected trader in the social media and YouTube community. And I'm thrilled to have you today, my friend.
Thanks for having me. It's an awesome day.
Yeah, I mean, we had a history made technically yesterday. We're recording this on Friday, according to UTC time. Still Thursday here in the US for me. But yeah, in the past 24 hours, we saw multiple new all time highs. I believe the current price as it sits is 103.6K, just slightly above that, depending on what exchange you're looking at. Regardless, this was a long time coming for traders. Just about exactly 1 month ago, we began seeing what many refer to as the Trump pump, where he was officially named or declared as the 47th US president, and his pro crypto stance uh, ended up causing some very bullish momentum in the markets almost immediately. And we really didn't stop outside of a few teases in the high 90Ks as we all sort of waited with bated breath for 100K Bitcoin. And we finally got there today. And my guess, Denom, is that you expected that this would probably happen at some point.
Yeah, I was expecting it, but to be completely honest, I wasn't expecting a minus 10% week so strong. Even though I saw there was a lot of the funding rates were high, I saw a lot of people were leveraged long,
Mm-hmm.
but I have to say I got a little bit blindsided by the 100K FOMO. So
Sure.
I kind of missed this move. I didn't play it perfectly, but it is what it is, and we had a very strong bounce back.
Yeah, and we at Santiment really appreciate your honest take and feedback. I think a lot of people in our community really like to hear from professional traders and very advanced experts in uh, investing and trading in crypto, and to learn that not everyone is perfect and can just perfectly calculate every up and down swing is uh, kind of a refreshing thing more than anything, because we're all human at the end of the day, and no one knows, including myself or anyone at Santiment, exactly where the next moves are going to be. But just like we do, I know that you do the same. You work with probabilities. You look at different trends, resistance levels, support levels, things like that, and you come to a conclusion on what the most likely scenario is going to be. And the pullback was just a little more than I think you or I expected. But at the end of the day, it's still a celebratory time, and we are significantly higher than where we were 2 months ago when the rally kind of started to kick off in mid-October, and especially 1 year ago. So no, I sympathize that it didn't work out exactly as you planned, but at the very least, Bitcoin and crypto are all still moving in the right direction.
Exactly, and the altcoins didn't have much of a dip anyway, so the market still looks very intact to me.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I was speculating with the team that what we would likely see. This was right after 100K had been breached. I said, I think we're going to see a little bit of FOMO here, which I'll get to. It appears that that's exactly what happened, followed by a pullback below 100K to get people spooked. And then we would see the true resilience of Bitcoin as to whether it quickly rebounds back above or kind of stays in this range for a while. If I had to guess between the two based on the metrics that we showed today, it's indicating a likelier chance of it going into a bit of a ranging pattern, somewhere between 96K to just below 100K, because I know for a fact that a lot of people previously had limit sell orders sitting right at 100K or just above 100K, and seeing how it dropped back below 100K right after it rose above for the first time, it's only going to make people double down on that strategy and put more limit sell orders right at 100K. So I think we'll have a bit of a bull and bear battle now here in the high 90Ks. What do you think?
Um, right now, the altcoins are, in my opinion, they are breaking out of a lot of the like a downward structures, like in the short term structures. So I think we will see a little bit momentum going forward with altcoins. But
Just to clarify, do you mean bullish momentum? You think altcoins are going to kind of fly while Bitcoin stays stable?
yeah, it looks like that. I was looking at the Bitcoin dominance chart, and we did have a nice bounce from the trend line to the downside. That means that altcoins usually will outperform Bitcoin. So it seems like the trend has shifted that altcoins will outperform Bitcoin in the short term.
Yeah, and I'd actually love in a future video to visualize that with you and look at that trend line, because a lot of people just kind of look at the markets as overall bullish, overall bearish, but transitioning between altcoins and back to Bitcoin is a very difficult thing to do. And checking out those indicators with you in the near future would be awesome if you're willing to do so.
Yeah, of course,
Well, we can
we
say
can
in the
do.
meantime that altcoins have been the story. I mean, obviously, the headlines and the mainstream media, they're going to be talking about Bitcoin's breach above 100K. I think they'd be talking about it a little more if it didn't fall right back below after it happened. But uh, a lot of attention is on Bitcoin. In fact, it's the number one trending token right now, according to our social trends dashboard. I'll show you right here really quick. If
All
we
right.
just go to trending coins, if I can get a load here, there we go. So Bitcoin by far getting the most attention compared to its normal average. And then you can see below it the new meme coin Hawk. Jasmy is up there, Sui, XNO, GME. Uh, what is this here? 1000 Sats, Wi Fi, Sundog, and Swiftcoin to round out the top 10. But yeah, while the attention is on Bitcoin, I've noticed specifically this setup where Bitcoin leads the trending tokens and then proceeds to go into this flat range while altcoins kind of thrive off of the recent profits that Bitcoin put up. Um, it's so predictable, in fact, Denom, that I'm not completely sold that that's the route we'll take, because we've seen this pattern so much. Uh, but as we go into a few of the metrics on this call, I do have a hard time believing that Bitcoin's going to fall back to 90K to 85K, at least not immediately. There could be a long term trend break, but as of now, there's just still too much bullish momentum in my mind.
Yeah, I do agree with that statement. Just for the fact that when we take a look at MicroStrategy and the Mara holdings,
Mm-hmm.
they are buying Bitcoin like crazy, and El Salvador is buying one Bitcoin every single day. There's just so much like institutional interest jumping in on the Bitcoin action right now
Right.
that I don't feel like the momentum is lost. But it ultimately, the strategies that these companies do, ultimately it's the holders, the big investors that decide where the market goes.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm just taking a look at the social volume on MicroStrategy or their stock ticker MSTR. They also have a coin MSTR. And there is a bit of like a directional change indication whenever we see a spike in discussions related to the company. I'm sure I could put in Michael Saylor as well, and that could add some extra social volume to it. But yeah, for the most part, I mean, we see kind of interesting. People tend to get a little FOMO when they hear about MicroStrategy because the news is almost always MicroStrategy is buying more crypto. And then the FOMO ensues, and we see a bit of a downturn. You saw that in late October. You saw the opposite in November. And then you saw a downturn in late November and kind of sideways movement in December. So it's not exactly the most clear indication, but I would pay attention to specific mentions of MicroStrategy and other institutions related to, you know, sentiment shifting to we better buy because this institution is doing the same and they're so smart. So I want to be like that, you know? So there's a lot of that going on sometimes that I think we take for granted. And overall, for the long term, it's great that these institutions are scooping up more and more Bitcoin. But in the short term, when you see so much reliance on them as the indicator that prices are going to go up, you sometimes end up seeing the opposite because the crowd usually gets it wrong and prices go the opposite direction of the crowd's expectations more often than not.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree with that also.
Now, shifting to a little bit about what institutions, or at least shark slash whale wallets in general, are doing right now. We put this out on all of our socials earlier today, and I think it's a really good summary of the past 3 years regarding major shifts from wallets holding either 10 or more wallets, or we can get really niche and look at just 10 to 10,000 Bitcoin wallets if we're trying to exclude exchanges a little bit. I still think that one of the best pure indicators that's very simple to digest is looking at what the 10 or more Bitcoin wallet crowd is doing at any given time. And you can see distinct moments where, for example, in February to July, they were just hemorrhaging coins. They were dumping them like crazy as the US, whether you like to see them as the center of the crypto world or not, they've had a tremendous impact on prices, and they were raising interest rates like crazy during the first half of 22. So whales were recognizing this, dumping their Bitcoin just like they were dumping their stocks, and prices were just dropping off a cliff. Now, we also learned that a lot of that had to do with the FTX collapse, which was right here where we suddenly just see the holdings of 10 plus BTC wallets fall off a cliff. In both of these cases, you see right here from February to July, the price dropped 50% as whales were dumping. Not a coincidence. It dropped 20% as a bunch of huge wallets, whether they were actually on FTX or just adjacent and watching from the sidelines and didn't trust Bitcoin as much, they were dumping here and price dropped 20%. And then we have the good stuff. Beginning from September 2023 to March 2024, they started accumulating very aggressively. And during this time, the price went up 175%. This is just 6 months. This isn't like it was a year and a half here. So in this 6 month span, they really, really accumulated until they got that March all-time high. Then they took a very short break. And yes, they kept accumulating, but it wasn't quite at the same rate as we saw during that 6 month stretch where they were just going nuts. So during this time, we see the Mt. Gox bankruptcy consolidation. Whether or not this is a coincidence, I haven't quite made up my mind. I do think there was some interesting stuff going on here that resulted in the 10 to 10K Bitcoin wallet specifically just going way down in value all of a sudden. Regardless, we eventually got to this point of October 2024 until now. And it doesn't take a genius to look at this line and say, yeah, that's a whole lot steeper than the regular accumulation that we were seeing here. That's just a normal part of whales doing whale things. So I believe that this has a lot, if not the most, to do with the eventual rise to above 100K that we just saw. And they're not slowing down. And that's one thing that I really think we should consider as a vote of confidence for the future of crypto, even after this scorching hot run that we've been on. So that's kind of my 3-year take on 5 big events that have happened from key stakeholders.
Yeah, and I would also like to add that during the Mt. Gox release of Bitcoin, at the same time we saw Germany dumping their Bitcoin, and we saw
Great point.
United States. I think they sold like 20,000 Bitcoin as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
there
it
was
was
a
just
lot of outrage toward those events, I remember.
yeah. So the sentiment was like, oh crap, everybody's selling now. So that's
Right.
one of the reasons why the prices fell at the same time.
Mm-hmm. But even then, it was a very short term drop because, as you said, sentiment got very negative all of a sudden because of these news stories. And then the 10 plus BTC crowd during this drop right here, they were just like, I don't care. I know where Bitcoin's going. I'm eyeing 100K. And then I think maybe it's just speculation, but I think that most institutional investors were rooting for Donald Trump. Uh,
Yeah.
Elon Musk being the most vocal of them, obviously. And when it became more and more clear that he would win, I mean, it wasn't a given, but it became more and more clear. And I think they got more and more confident in accumulating Bitcoin uh, as we got closer and closer to the November 5th election night, exactly a month ago from the recording of this video. So, yeah, I think this is, in my opinion, the most important chart to watch right now. Um, and we were looking at how miners were reacting as well. And maybe you have a theory on this. I do as well, Danone. But what's your take about this recent drop all of a sudden? Just in the past 24 hours, they were holding 2.08 million, and they've dropped about 50,452, 53 Bitcoin just in this past 24-hour span.
Yeah, that was an interesting move. I don't know exactly what is causing them to sell, but definitely it seemed like they sold anyway. If it's to uh, you know, pay for for the expenses, or they want to lock in profits. I don't know
Mhm.
what is the reason, but we know that they sold 50,000 Bitcoin at this moment in time.
Yeah. One thing about this time of year, a lot of people start thinking about taxes. We're about 3 weeks away from the end of the calendar year, and December is a notoriously choppy time. October and November have historically been great for crypto, and then December it gets a bit unpredictable depending on whether it was a positive or negative month for crypto markets or stock markets. And pretty much everyone, as long as you were on the longing side of whatever you were investing in, you had a pretty good year. 2024 was a very good year for both the stock market and crypto. And I've seen similar events in 2017 for those who remember um, the big celebratory 18K plus all time high from back then. December, like early December, was where we topped out and then had this big correction that lasted like a year and a half. Um, but I do believe that institutional traders in particular, and miners are included in this, they're very mindful of um, consolidating their holdings to align with paying off expenses, as you said, and taxes and things like that. And I think a lot of people just, miners specifically, they're calculating that profitability point where the machinery and the tech that it takes to mine Bitcoin might out expense the cost of Bitcoin at any given time. So they've actually been going down since late July, which is interesting. But I think this sudden move is a reaction to 100K or even just uh, very close to 100K at the time that they made this drop. So it's
Yeah,
interesting. Yeah, go ahead.
and it does seem like a one-off event, so it doesn't seem like we will probably see that the trend continue, that they do sell their reserves if price stays above 100K or these price levels. Because when we take a look at the chart, you can see they really started to sell or dump their Bitcoin assets from uh, basically 60K plus.
Right.
Until that point, they were just accumulating more Bitcoin, and then the halving happened. Seems like still miners want to sell
Yeah.
their reserves. So I don't know if how many of them are actually underwater and have to sell it to keep up with the expenses, and how many are just locking in profits, or uh, I don't know, I don't know what they're doing. But usually, after a heavy dump like this, miners start to accumulate once again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they've had a
So
very interesting relationship with price. I mean, they've been dumping since April, and obviously, if you've been looking toward miner balances as uh, alpha for crypto, you probably are not very trusting of them at this point because they've been dumping for about almost 8 months straight, and prices have gone up since they started that dump about 49%. So I, they've had their moments where they've correlated well with the price, especially post FTX collapse, where they really gobbled up a lot of coins. They got it very wrong here. At the end of the day, I think it's a sign of confidence when they're moving up, and a little bit worrisome when they're moving down. But I'm not too concerned when, again, the 10 plus BTC wallets are just continuing to climb. I mean, going back to January of 2023, they're almost up 400,000 Bitcoin collectively, and that's a great sign to me. So
Yeah, definitely. We see accumulation, but miners are practically the wallet that keeps on dumping.
yeah, almost like a counter indicator at the moment. But I wouldn't advise that either. I think it's just we just have to watch them from afar until they begin to correlate with the price once again.
Yeah, but it's nice to know practically who was selling during this time, and we saw that it was miners at least selling 50,000 Bitcoin here.
Mm-hmm.
So uh, it's not that worrisome to me from the fact that miners taking profits. That's fine, but at least the institutional investors are not scared.
Yeah, if anything, considering they're going the opposite direction,
Yeah,
it's just telling me that most miners don't hold over 10 Bitcoin because they don't have much of a relationship with one another at all.
yeah,
Moving on to a few on-chain metrics really quick, I just wanted to point out, we just had our biggest day of on-chain transaction volume by dollars in what was it? Yeah, they surpassed what we saw in March. We got to go way back in time, actually. Something around mid August 2022. These are now very zoomed out bars, but I believe somewhere around July or August is when we last saw a spike, a daily spike this big. So that is an indication, excuse me, that's an indication that we are um, probably seeing some profit taking. And there was a ton of limit orders just firing off once we had that big 100K cross.
yeah, yeah. And also, if you look at the network realized profits and losses,
Yeah.
you will see a massive spike of profit taking there.
Yeah, let's see. Are you referring to like really short term or like 8 hours? I see it pretty clearly at about the 8 hour mark here.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, so that's a sign clearly lots of profit taking happening. Not necessarily a bad thing. In order for prices to grow, you need to see profit taking on a regular basis. But if it's like a really massive one, especially like this, that's an indication that prices are about to reverse course, and that's exactly what we saw back in mid October on the upside. So I wouldn't quite call this like a completely anomaly spike, but it's up there. So we'll see what this means for the future over the next couple weeks, especially. I also wanted to point out Wales. They had a lot to do with it. Yesterday, there were 5,950 individual transactions on the network that were valued at over $1 million. If we go back in time for that, we got to go way back before we find a spike that big, probably around June 2022, last time we saw something bigger. So, again, that's another indication that there's some profit taking going on, even on the whale side. But again, collectively, the whale holdings still look to be moving in the right direction despite this big spike.
yeah. One thing I do have to say that what worries me a little bit is when we take a look at past cycles,
Yeah.
uh, there are some like midterm bull cycle dumps that can take Bitcoin price like -20%, even -30% in some cycles.
Yeah, you're totally right. I mean, when you see whale transactions get super high, they correlate a lot with these big tops here. April
Yeah,
2021, you see them get huge.
and it
October, November, same thing. And then here, even in March, during that all
and,
time high above 73K.
And when you take a look at the December 2020, right at the left side of your screen,
Mm-hmm.
you see that the Bitcoin price had a massive dump, uh, and the a little bit to the right
Oh, right here.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a huge move on the Bitcoin price to the downside, but then the bull market actually continued after the profit taking had been done.
Yeah.
So
Good point.
what worries me a little bit is even though I'm bullish, there's a there's at least a decent chance that we go and actually maybe we go even to like 80K at some point. Just if people really want to take in and lock in the profits that they've uh, received by holding Bitcoin.
Yeah. No, it really
But then
depends. Go ahead.
but then usually the last phase of the cycle is when the retail investors come around and then they push the prices even higher. So when the price goes down, then that attracts new investors to the market.
Mm-hmm. Great point. Yeah.
So that's kind of what I'm still debating on. I haven't made a decision which way we go, but I would say that even though the markets look bullish, even though the altcoins are holding very strong against Bitcoin, and this pump back to 97K, 98K was very strong, there is a chance that this continues for a few weeks before we actually see the real upside.
Yeah. One thing about I agree with what you said. I do think that's a legitimate concern, and it very much is plausible and on the table right now. And I like to check what the sentiment metrics look like because even with whales looking strong, if there's a bunch of denial that we could drop that far, and everyone is just saying staying, you know, strongly bullish no matter what happens right now, that can really have an impact on a what would have been a minor retrace being a much larger retrace because retail traders are just you know stubbornly buying every dip possible with no fear whatsoever. We need a healthy amount of fear in order for prices to rise, and sometimes we just have to see how things are looking on a daily basis with the sentiment. And one thing that supports your theory would be the level of huge funding rates on the positive side right now. So longing is at a huge level compared to what we've seen in a very long time. If we go back a year, the last time we saw similar spikes, you can see the green very tiny here in the corner now that I've zoomed it back to a year. It's pretty much matching the same level we saw at the peak of the March 2024 run before we saw that 73K all time high. And I would hope now that we have dropped a little bit that this green spike quickly goes back down. Um, if I zoom into March and April, and I'll make the price a little more granular here. When there were drops, see how the funding rate was actually going up during these minor retraces here? So price would go down 7% or so in 24 hours. And then all of a sudden, people are longing even more.
Yeah.
That's a sign that people are just in complete denial that crypto could ever go down. They've watched it just go through the roof for the last few weeks or even few months. So they just believe that this is just an ATM machine at this point, that they got to hoard as much as possible. And when that's the case, and they're buying the dip every single time, or just adding more long leveraged or margin positions anytime they can, that's a sign that we're getting overheated, and we need to shake those overly confident traders out of the market.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And when I take a look at like liquidation heat maps,
Mm-hmm.
previously I saw, well, we saw a lot of liquidations right now with this massive wick, but there are still a lot of longs like 86K
Yeah.
range, 85K range. So let's see if we go there or not. I do believe that we're gonna head upwards eventually, and this is just a minor dip in the bucket. But that's just my opinion at the moment.
Right. Yeah, I believe CoinDesk, if I'm not mistaken, made a post today about how there were just enormous liquidations going on. I can't remember whether it was record setting or just very, very large, but it surpassed a number we had not seen for quite a while. So, not surprising that a lot of people who are buying at the top, or may have heard that Bitcoin went above 100K and then decided to buy. Um, I'm not surprised that those people got pretty hammered.
Yeah.
And the other thing, sentiment was. Go ahead, to know.
No, we can continue.
Yeah, I just wanted to support the sentiment that funding rates are showing. This is a recent custom chart I made where we're plotting 8-hour increments of the amount of positive sentiment commentary across social media and then negative sentiment commentary. And we're putting them together so you can see positive is always going to be a little bit above. There's exceptions when, Sam Bankman-Fried tries to ruin crypto for everybody. But for the most part, you're going to see positive biases all the time. And if we just arbitrarily point a line to the middle of this gold line is, by the way, the ratio of these positive versus negative bars. So if there's, 2 positive comments for every 1 negative comment, it would be like 1.5 to 1, right? So we take that ratio and then we're multiplying it by the percentage of discussions related to Bitcoin versus all the other meme coins and Ethereum and every other altcoin out there. And we combine that and we can actually find some pretty good alpha. When we see really big spikes like this, that's when we tend to top. When we see it get very low, that's when we tend to get bottoms occurring. It's more apparent if we go back in time. This one was interesting. This was the Trump pump and the reaction to him being elected. And there was just a very brief drop, and then we skyrocketed because institutionals basically overpowered the retail FOMO that was going on. But you can see, for example, this was a great top signal, the second largest spike of this gold line. We immediately drop back down. You can see when it gets really low, like right here, bunches of tiny lines forming. That's when we bottom out and we go up. So yeah, this was a pretty large spike. It's like the 6th or 7th largest we've seen in the past 6 months. So that was a concern to me. And sure enough, we dropped right afterwards. And now we're back in kind of this neutral territory. When I draw this line or so, arbitrarily, I'd say it's right around there or so. So if you get below this, that's a sign that people are a little more bearish than average. And here, anything above, they're more bullish than average. So I think it's a really cool chart. And, I'm curious to know, do you use any other specific sentiment metrics on Sandbase?
I find it very interesting when you show me the sentiment statistics. Personally, I don't really use sentiment in my own analysis because it's not as easy to understand for me. I'm a technical person. I
Right.
understand like real numbers. A lot of these can be from bots and so on.
That's
So
true.
uh, adopted this strategy in my own trading. But I find it very very interesting to look at this, and I'm trying to find the correlations here, and I do see it.
Yeah, they're not as consistent as something like whale accumulation, but I do think they make a good support metric to check out along with it. So, we'll leave the charts to all of these in the description of this video, and we'd love to hear what you guys think. One final thing I should mention is the ETF volume, which has remained pretty high. You can see it really peaked during the first week after Trump was officially elected. And I think that's probably the number one argument to point to Trump's official selection as one of the main drivers of this pump. His pro-crypto stance has clearly resonated with people. People believe him, and the confidence in crypto especially amongst institutionals who have overlap in both equities and crypto. It soared right after that announcement was made. And yeah, it's come back down a little bit, but you can still see on a daily basis how much higher it is than what it was at all, spring, summer, and fall. I'm
Yeah, it
curious to
clearly
know. I was just going to say, what do you think about the correlation with ETF activity and how much it helps or doesn't help crypto is in terms of prices?
yeah, I've looked at this for quite a while, and during the era when Bitcoin was 60, 70K, 50K, during that time, like 6 months, when I was looking at the ETF inflows and the amount of Bitcoin held by all of the funds, not just in USA but everywhere, it was pretty sideways, the total holdings. But when I looked at the individual spikes, it seemed like the ETF investors were just following the price. They
Mm-hmm.
were not dictating the price. But as we finally saw the election be done with and we saw Trump getting elected, that's when ETFs actually really started to accumulate Bitcoin once again.
Right.
I think they thought, or they're thinking exactly what BlackRock has been saying, the biggest Bitcoin ETF issuer, that you should have at least 1% of your portfolio in Bitcoin, optimally 3 or 5%. So when BlackRock is promoting Bitcoin, uh, uh, that is picked up by pension funds and all these other institutional investors that will buy Bitcoin even if it's going down, as long as it is in that uh, 1 or 3% range that they want to hold in their portfolio. So if Bitcoin price is going down, that means they accumulate more Bitcoin. But if Bitcoin is going up, that also means that they will sell. But right now we're still in the adopting phase, where more institutions are adopting Bitcoin in their portfolio. So that means that there's more accumulation than distribution. But right now, it's, in my opinion, this is a very good indicator to show that institutions, they don't really care what the price is. They now just want to accumulate as much as they can. So
Yeah.
it has changed from the time period from the previous 6 months.
They are much more long term investors than the stereotypical crypto trader who's in their 20s still living at home and first discovering investing. So by that logic, it makes a lot of sense. Who cares what the price is now? I'm holding this for the next decade. I just want to get in. That's kind of what ETF activity is indicative of in my mind. And it sounds like your statement resonates.
Yeah, it does seem like that right now.
Yeah. Well, very good, man. I think this was a great little recap of how the markets look, and I really appreciate your own trading take and your own experiences being shared here. It's an unpredictable time. When we go on this kind of rally, it's natural to eventually hit a peak and cool off from all of the euphoria and hype that had been going on. There wasn't as much hype as you might have expected in late November, but once we hit this psychological resistance and broke through it, that being 100K, we did finally see that excitement trickle in, and now we see what the next move is from retail traders. We know where institutionals are going; they're not showing any signs of dumping. So I'm excited to see how this next week, if not just the rest of the year, ends up going, these final 3-ish weeks or so. But yeah, thanks again, my friend. And any final words from you? You want to give people a quick shout out as to where they can find you?
Yeah, well, I'm mostly active on X and YouTube, so I you can simply find me by typing Dinome if you want to find me. But one more final piece of hope that I want to give to people is that when you take a look at MicroStrategy, or when you take a look at Mara Holdings, who have adopted the when they sell equity of their company in a convertible bond strategy, and they buy Bitcoin with that money that they raise with these bonds. They are targeting pension funds that cannot buy Bitcoin directly, but they can buy convertible bonds, which means that indirectly they can suddenly get exposure to Bitcoin. And a lot of these pension funds, they are underwater, which means that they have to find risky assets to have enough uh, value to basically pay back their own debts that they own to investors. So that is creating a lot of institutional demand for the time being. And we can see that institutional demand is at the peak because Mara Holdings, they just issued $1 billion worth of sales and they oversubscribed the whole thing again. And MicroStrategy, whenever they issue these convertible bonds, they always oversubscribe. So there's a lot of institutional demand, and as they see the results, that is creating more. It is kind of creating a bubble, but at least as of now, it is still working. So as these dips continue, I will expect more buying from institutional investors. So that's my final take.
Yeah, very interesting. I appreciate that piece of advice there. So we'll look out for exactly as you're describing. And thank you everyone for watching. We will definitely catch you on the next one, and I'm looking forward to the next one with you, Dano.
Awesome. Thank you.